Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Well, hello there and Happy New Year, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to a new episode. This one's 292 and the first of 2025 of Third Degree, the podcast. Dan is not with us. He is still off and hopefully will rejoin us soon. But that means for the first episode of 25, we've got a very special guest. Please join me in a warm welcome of a Third Degree alumnus himself and a guy who really knows his numbers, Arman Kafai, here onto the show. Hello, Arman. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
Yeah, Kafai, you got it right. I mean,
sweet.
You got it right.
If there was a video component, you'd see me fist pumping that I pronounced a foreign last name correctly for the first time on the first try. It's good to see you again, my friend.
It's good to be back, guys. How long has it been? 7, 6. I mean, we all still talk, but been in as a part of some sort of third degree thing.
I think the last time I saw and talked to you in this kind of capacity, you were still in high school, you were unmarried, and you didn't have 3 children yet. And now you have all those things in your life.
Maybe. I'll have to get back to you on that. I'm not sure about the 3 kids part. The marriage is a bit of a long shot. I don't know if I still graduated high school, so we're still kind of in that. But it's good to be back, guys. It's good to be back.
Well, we needed your help for this. And before we get to that, let me introduce everybody to my hero, your hero, everybody's hero, editor, founder of thirddegree.net, and the original soccer influencer himself, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz. Happy New Year, my friend.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you. And Arman, I was going to say it's about 6 or 7 years since you bailed on us to go to work for the man and sold us out. So I don't know. It's been a while.
It's been a long time. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if selling out's the right word, because in the end it wasn't that much, difference.
The money wasn't there, so
how much difference in pay. But it was. I still, it was a great time. It was a great time.
Hey, 0 to minimum wage is still a pay increase, Arman. What are you doing these days? You're doing what? You're working for a bank?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working for a bank right now, so doing that good old stuff and doing freelance MLS stuff on the side as well. With stuff with Backheeled, some podcast the hacks, etc. So
yeah,
it's still keeping involved in the game, and after leaving the club side, it's been a lot different. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, so we should probably tell everybody there was a run of time where you were one of the data nerds for FC Dallas.
The only data nerd.
You were
there was no other data nerd in there. There was no data nerd in there. It was just me, and even then, I was half a data nerd because I still had my job, right? So it was different. I'd always see you guys, and you guys are like, "Hey, what's up? And I'd be like, "Oh, I have to go run into this." Buzz, you saw me. I have to go run into a room and record a camera for a little bit,
Yeah.
For sure. Well, Arman, we brought you on specifically for, 1, I wanted to see you again, and 2, Dan wasn't here, and 3, we got a lot to talk about that involves numbers and specifically roster and salary rules, because so much has happened, Buzz, since the last time we recorded an episode. Were you out of town or something?
Well, we had holidays. I went to Italy for a bit, and then the team, of course, made a bunch of move, and then we had holidays, and then I didn't leave town, but I was unplugged with family, and that might as well have been. That was the joke, is that I wasn't even out of town, and they made all these trades. So,
well, we got a list of stuff to talk about, and it took me a few minutes to kind of sort out what order we should do this in, but we will start with what I think everybody tuning into the pod is most interested in hearing about, is all of the rumors. Now, as the time of this recording, I'm correct in saying, Buzz, none of this related to Seattle is official, correct?
Well, nothing is official in the sense that it's been announced. The people that have reported the details, of course, are very good, and there's no doubt that what they've said is true. The day that Bogart put out was the first one, I believe, to put out all the technical details of this hypothetical trade. I confirmed with sources on my end that as of that moment, Jesus had not actually signed anything. So, while people are talking about this is all on the table and Jesus has agreed to this or that, he may have agreed in principle, and I don't doubt that, but nothing is signed. And my assumption at the time is that they're waiting for the window to actually hit and see if they get some calls at the last minute. They being Jesus and his people
Okay.
To see if something's out there other than this.
All right.
Because
so stop. Hold on one sec. Let's set the table for everybody, because it's been a bit since, I believe the last time we did an episode, there was a rumor out there that Paul and Jesus both were up for being traded to Seattle, but we were all very much in the dark on that. But since we recorded last, the rumor from Bogart and others is that there is a deal on the table for Jesus Ferreira. Well, let's get the Paul thing out of the way. The Paul thing appears to be in limbo or is still very much up in the air. Correct?
The two moves are completely independent. So they, each could still happen on its own merits.
Okay.
So the Paul one, we have not heard anything in a bit, but it is still just as viable as the Jesus one, really, I think.
All right. So the Jesus one is that Jesus would go to Seattle, which means he's probably going to end up having to redo his deal, and we'll get into that part. But Dallas, in return, would get, at least as far as Buzz is concerned, pending what he said in a previous episode, less than ideal numbers. $2 million in GAM, some dude named Leo Chu, and an international spot. And that was what Dallas would get in return, along with getting Jesus and his attitude and his $2.2 million salary off their books. And that is what we're waiting to around to find out, is whether or not it's a real deal or not.
Yeah, the key is, of course, that FC Dallas is not a great team right now. And so they need to be able to open up powerful slots with powerful chunks of money in order to do things. And while Jesus is a great player, at the point, the stuff they have isn't working, right? They need to do something. And so this is one of the ways you do it, because if you trade or sell Jesus, you can get in large chunks of GAM, which Arman will get to in a minute. You open up a DP spot, so then you can do things with Paul Arriola. If you end up keeping him, you give yourself a chance to go out and get various players of various stature, because that's one of the biggest, most powerful mechanics in the league. And it's about time for Jesus to have a fresh start, really. So the bottom line is that this thing is, appears to be moving forward. Of course, Jesus still wants to go to Europe. So, there are questions about why he would want to take this deal. And the bottom line is that, he's been here since he was 9 years old, right? And sometimes people just need a fresh change of scenery. And we've seen this a lot with FC Dallas, and particularly homegrowns. You see them come up and be pros for 4 or 5 years, and then they kind of I want to do something different. I've been here since I was a kid. We saw it with Kellen Acosta. We saw it with Reggie, really. You saw it with, you can name any homegrown. Some of them feel more strongly about it than others. But at some point, these guys all look for greener sceneries. The only guy that's not been that way publicly is Paxton Pomykal, who's been all in on Dallas all the time, although he harbors interest in Europe eventually, but that's a whole different discussion.
I want to get into somewhat of the emotions and the larger meaning of this transaction, assuming it goes through a little bit later on. Arman, what I really would love to hear from you is a little bit about the money detail and how this GAM thing works, and how this benefits Dallas, how it will affect Jesus financially, and what those definitions are. And I hope maybe you can fill in some of those holes.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, right now, Seattle is in a spot where they do not want to make Jesus a designated player. That's the way that they want to structure this deal, and I think that's the only way this deal is going to go through. Therefore, Jesus will have to take a deal that will push him into the TAM threshold. The TAM threshold would mean that his salary would need to be around 1.7-ish, 1.8-ish, somewhere in that range, lower, even lower maybe, for him to be in that TAM range so he can be bought down using target allocation money, aka TAM, and he doesn't count as a designated player. So it's a bit complicated on that regard. He has to accept a new deal, take a pay cut to go to Seattle. For Dallas, this would open up a designated player spot, which they're all equal to the same, but it gives them flexibility to say, hey, we're going to change up the roster construction if they want to. Remember, MLS, there's 2 different ways you can construct a roster. You can either get 3 designated players and 3 U22 spots, or you can get 2 designated players and 4 U22 spots. And those spots are important because you can spend a lot of transfer fees on those, and actually they only hit at the budget for nothing. I'll give you an example. Musa, right? Musa was bought for a really big fee. His salary, according to MLSPA, is $2.2 million. He hits at the FC Dallas budget charge, or the salary cap, at $743,000 because of the designated player that he is in that status. So those spots are important, Peter. And what that does is this would open up a spot for FC Dallas to either say, hey, we want to add a third DP and orchestrate something in that capacity. I saw rumors about a player on Twitter. Or it allows them to say, hey, we want to champ a roster build. We'll build around Musa and Allen, and then we'll add a couple of other U22 players as well that we think can develop and grow. So all in all, this just gives Dallas a lot more flexibility to operate within the means of the roster construction rules in MLS.
Buzz, if you take everybody into consideration, all the players, Dallas, Seattle, Jesus, and Chu, who do you think's the big winner out of this deal?
Seattle.
Why?
Well, Jesus right now is at his lowest moment really since he's become a big time player. Physically, goal scoring, emotionally, he's at rock bottom basically. So they're getting a player on budget, partially because Dallas is a team that has missed the playoffs and are desperate to do some things. And when teams are bad, they sometimes will panic and undersell a player rather than sticking with it and holding on to him. And to give you a clear example, if Dallas were to just hold on to Jesus and see if there's a deal now, or maybe see there's a deal this summer, if he starts playing better, anything you sell him for over $3 million, you pocket $3 million in GAM. And then you also have all that extra money on top that you put into the organization like they did with Ricardo Pepi. That's better for FC Dallas than this deal with Seattle. Now, all the parts that they put together, and maybe we'll talk some more about these in a minute, all those parts add up to that $3 million-ish in GAM value, but they don't exceed it. And, if you had the ability to be patient, if you were FC Dallas, if you had the fan base that was loyal enough and had the revenue bases that were loyal enough, you could ride out Jesus a little bit. But they really don't have that luxury. He's really hurting their cap situation across the board, as is Paul across the board. So they're kind of desperate to make this happen. Whereas Seattle's getting a player who is at a rock bottom price, but at one point was worth a price of $12 million, depending on what country was offering that. It's like when Dallas got Alvan Velasco on the cheap for like $9 million or whatever it was for Allen, when a year before people were talking about $17 million for him. And then COVID hit and his team was cash desperate and they were forced to do a deal below value. So that's the same scenario here. Dallas is going to be forced to do a deal slightly below value, or maybe a lot below value of when he's an 18-goal scorer and a guy in the argument for MVP and playing in the World Cup, right? So because Dallas has to do something to get out of the bottom of the league, they're going to sell a player at discount, and Seattle's going to get a player at discount that could be a huge player in the long run for them.
Arman, who do you think the winner in this is? Do you agree with Buzz or somebody else?
I 100% agree with Buzz because Seattle is just flush with allocation money. So the way that Sounder at Heart has also reported this, and Buzz, I don't know if you've heard anything of the structure of the GAM. Dallas is only getting $1 million in GAM in 2025, and then the rest are spread out across the 2 years of 2026 and 2027. That's according to Sounder Hart, Jeremiah Oshen, and those guys. My guess,
and they're good.
Yeah, and my guess is you go 1,500,000, 500. And Seattle, they just sold off a bunch of international spots. They have so much allocation money. I would not be surprised if they got allocation money for being in the Club World Cup. I mean, I have no idea about any of that stuff, but I would not be surprised if they received anything. So for Seattle, this is nothing. I don't think this will be much for them in terms of actual investment. Leo Chu is a player that they've been wanting to, get rid of, and they have a sell-on fee for him as well. So if there's a deal, according to Sounders of Heart, the details on there, and if Leo Chu is sold, they would retain some of that sell-on fee as well. And Dallas is selling a player, I think, at a very low value. And look, I get why Dallas is making this move. This move, again, is you need to turn the page. But to me, this is across the board probably a culmination of the mismanagement of Jesus Ferreira as a whole versus the current situation right now. Because I think right now it's the value just isn't there, especially when you look at the GAM and how it's spread up across the years.
I want to touch on what you just said about mismanagement of Jesus. How much of this, Buzz, is on Jesus? I mean, I think if we're all being honest, the reason why we're in the spot, the reason why they are in the spot they are in, they being the club and Jesus, is because Jesus has been really poor for a season and a half and hasn't done very much. Seattle doesn't know what player they're getting, and they're still paying him a tremendous amount of money to come up there and play. Would you agree that they mismanaged Jesus?
Well, what they mismanaged was the capitalization on the value. It's not their fault that the Russia 12 million thing got rejected. That was MLS officially. Unofficially, we don't know, but officially it was MLS. There was a deal on the table last summer to Las Palmas, which is in Spain. We don't know the value of that number, but that deal died at the last second. And my sort of vibe I got was that the club basically said no, or did something and they made it fall apart at the last second. And to me, that was a little bit of a panic situation where they know that Jesus has wanted to leave for a couple of years and they had this deal lined up. But you remember last year at that point, effectively, they were on record for worst record in club history. And they're floundering and they're panicking. And I'm sure that someone, probably likely the coach, was like, you cannot sell Jesus in the middle of this season. I'm already cooked. So they didn't sell him. And I'm sure that, and as his value has declined, as his, you remember also a year ago in the winter, there was this talk of this issue he was having, this hernia or whatever it was. And they were like, oh, we're going to fix it. Not going to have surgery. We're going to try and work through it and rehab through it. That obviously didn't work. So there was a miscalculation and a misplay or a misdiagnosis or I don't know what the word would be, the prescription of how they should fix it. And he was troubled with it all year and never got better. I'm sure Seattle looks at a player that's like fresh scenery, fresh coaching, surrounded by great players. We'll get him with our medical staff and he'll get healthy. They're probably banking on a guy who's at his bottom value, but yet is capable of being an 18-goal scorer in this league. And honestly, if Jesus had been 15-15 last year, we wouldn't have had a coaching change here. They would have been well up into the playoffs. Even with Musa performing, if he'd have done that too, they would have far outscored their goals against, and we would not be having this conversation at all. So it's not just on the club's mismanagement, but they have mismanaged him for sure as part of this.
But how much value, and I mean, there's so many different layers to this deal for all parties involved. It's really, really hard to kind of like pick this thing apart and do it justice. But the one part of this that I keep thinking about is the idea that I think we can all agree that Jesus Ferreira represents kind of the crown jewel of this academy. I know Pappy is its own thing, but for me, Jesus coming in and becoming the guy that they gave a ton of money to stay here and be the man, I don't think this is the ending any of us ever imagined would be when Jesus left the club. And so I think that is an indicator of how badly the two parties wanted to get away from each other, to the point where Dallas is left with really only one option. And I think the part that this is really scary to me, and I keep referring to, I call it the MLS version of Saquon Barkley effect, which is, what if Seattle's about to get a kid who's, 24 years old. Since we last talked, since we last talked, we found out is going to be a father, and now is getting ready to turn around and try to go resurrect his career at a direct in-conference nemesis. Dallas must have really needed to get him off the books to have pulled the trigger on this particular deal.
Yeah, you're looking at a guy who coming out of the World Cup and at the end of this season following that was worth, I thought, 10, 12 million, which is where the offer eventually came in for him. 2 years later, and they're scraping the bottom of the barrel in order to try and get $3 million for the guy. And they've painted themselves into a corner. FC Dallas has. They're stuck. They need to try and do some things to improve this team, or else you're just gambling that he's going to come good, and he doesn't want to be here. He wants out as badly as they want him to be out. And I think you're right in terms of him being the cream of the players that they've kept. Obviously, when you get into the discussions of Chris Richards and Pepe's and Weston McKinney's, then you have other conversations. But in terms of like capitalizing on this is our guy, and he actually had what I thought was a relatively value contract for what he was doing when they got him re-upped. When he was on the middle of that big time run or going into that big time run, and so it's only now when he's had a season and a half of straight downhill to the bottom where he's barely worth, not even going to be able to pull $3 million for him, that you think this whole thing has gone horribly south and is not. It's so far south, in fact, that he's talking or considering taking $1 million pay cut in order to leave, and he just found out he's having a kid. So like that should tell you how sour the whole thing is and how desperate FC Dallas is to move on at this point.
And Buzz, yeah, like you were saying, I think the more, I guess, damning thing is he's like, yeah, just get me out of here, for lack of a better word, because he's taking a pay cut and a significant one, at least probably $500,000, $600,000, give or take, which is, that's a pretty significant pay cut to leave the club. And I think whenever we were watching him growing up through the academy, the 2017 Dallas Cup team, etc., I don't think any of us envisioned this ending with him going to the Seattle Sounders, who have consistently year after year in the playoffs cooked FC Dallas in a way. And now he's going to a stage to where, and I think the big winner out of this, to be honest with you, is Jesus Ferreira. If we're going to be honest, he gets to go to a spot with a club that is, proven and known. You have Brian Schmetzer, who's a fantastic coach, and you get a scene and you get a moment to show off yourself in the Club World Cup against top opponents like Atletico Madrid and PSG. Like that, how is that not a way to, I guess, quote unquote, revitalize your career?
I understand where you're coming from, and I also understand Buzz's point about Seattle being the big winner in this, but there's a part of me that feels like Dallas might be the winner in this. Now, all of this is predicated on the idea that Jesus doesn't, Saquon Barkley them to death in a 97th minute of a must-have game, okay?
Yeah.
But if Jesus doesn't return to Jesus form, Dallas got him off the books, and there's just a sense to me that is a guy in a personality and a thing that had to happen. So the emotional component of it needed to happen. Check. You got that money off your books. Check. You've got a DP slot that you need to use for something else other than Jesus. Accomplished. Check. I think you can make an argument that Seattle's the winner. You can make an argument that Jesus is the winner, but I don't think you can discount that depending on how this plays out, that Dallas could end up being a winner of this. But I do think we really won't know who the winner of this trade is until at the earliest, the end of the 25 season.
Yeah, if Jesus doesn't rebound, then you would be right. Then Dallas will get a win out of this. But look, I also want to circle back and remind everybody that when I tweeted on the 31st that the deal wasn't, that Jesus hadn't signed it, that was around 5 or 6 o'clock on the 31st. That's New Year's Eve. So it didn't happen after that. Didn't happen on the 1st. So maybe something happened today, but the windows in Europe all just opened. So I bet you that this thing won't go down for at least another week, if not all the way to the end of the European window. I think that Jesus will want to wait until the last second of the European windows being open, which is relatively short this time because it's their middle window. You know that, right? So I think Jesus will wait as long as he can before he puts pen to paper to make this happen.
So that does lead me to this question. If a club in Spain, let's say Las Palmas comes back and says, all right, we'll give you $4 million for Jesus. Is that a better deal?
Yes.
I'm not talking about Jesus. Is that a better deal for Dallas?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because then you get the full $3 million in GAM right now, and you get $1 million to put into your club some other way, whatever you want to do. Oh, the whole $4 million in real money, you get $3 million in fake money instantly. So,
nope, exactly. Buzz hit the hammer on the head. Look, so teams can turn up to $3 million of their transfer revenue into that GAM. And exactly, if they sold Jesus for that amount, maybe $4 million or whatever, they could convert a lot of that into GAM, maybe even more than how much they would get. They can also spread it. I think they can also spread that across the years. I don't think it all has to come in at once. Compared to the value that they're getting right now, which again is 1 million in 2020. The one number that we know is apparently it's 1 million in 2025 and spread out across the years. So for Dallas, I think an MLS incentivizes you to sell players and do this because it'll give you more money to put back into your squad. It would be a better deal if they could figure out a way to sell them to Europe. But I mean, with the current offer that they have, it would kind of be okay. You get some roster flexibility, and then you also get a piece that I guess you could work with in Leo Chu.
Okay, so that's what I want to know, because the Leo Chu and international spot was the two bonus additions when the rumor from Bogart came out that none of us had thought about. So Arman or Buzz, I don't care who, what is the value of this deal with the player in Chu and the value of the international spot as it pertains to Dallas?
So for the international spot, I would probably say it's around $150,000 to $175,000 in allocation money. That's like it's not that, it's pretty small. For Leo Chu, look, so he's right now a U22 player on the Seattle books, but he doesn't have to be, because MLS U22s and designated players, their deals are amortized across. So like if I paid $3 million for a player on a 3-year guaranteed deal, it would be his salary plus $1 million, his salary plus $1 million. That's the budget charge. But according to MLS's budget charge, it would only be $200,000 because he'd be designated as a U22 player. I don't know if I lost you there, Peter. But
I mean, yeah, that this is quickly beginning to give me tired head. But yes, I get.
But here's a kicker: Leo Chu is not a guaranteed part of his guaranteed portion of his contract. He's actually on an option part of the deal, so that amortized thing goes away. So essentially, based on his MLSPA salary of like $550,000 last year, you could theoretically just slot Leo Chu into like I'm pretty sure you could slot Leo Chu into a senior roster spot, or if he's making above the whatever threshold, you could bring him down and not use a U22 spot for him. So with that, you could actually take those transfer funds and put those back in into your squad without having the restrictions of the U22 sales that exist in the roster rules.
All right, but Buzz, in terms of Eric Quill and how he's going to play this team, if I go look up, when I went up and looked up Chu's numbers for 24, they were pretty crummy. He had a really good 23, but he had a very Jesus Ferreira-like 24. And which I find kind of funny. I mean, I'm going to blow Arman away with this actual stat that I looked up. In the 15 games he played in 2024, his total XG for all of those games added up, cumulative, is 0.08. His total cumulative assisted XG is 1.1 over the course of 16 games. That's pretty crap for a guy coming off the wing.
Yeah, in 2024, his numbers compare favorably. They're in the same ballpark as Bernie Kamungo and Paul Arriola when you look at them as per 90. So not great. But if you look at his 2023 numbers, they're phenomenal. He's way better than both. So obviously, some coaching needs to come into play here. I can't speak for what all happened in Seattle. There's lots of talk about the kind of players that are behind him, and he doesn't do a lot of defensive work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you watch the tape of him in 2023 on what he looks like this vertical kind of wing player who wants to get forward and go at people. That is a kind of hallmark of the kind of players that Eric Quill uses, right? Pace, power, athleticism, but also some skill. You know, he's when you watch him play, he's going to look vaguely like Bernie Kamungo, to be fair. Same sort of player. So a player that I think fits the paradigm here. What kind of player are you going to get? Are you going to get the 23 or the 24? Who's to say? At the other hand, he's on an option. So like this could be a simple, like, give us a guy that's going to be out of contract at the end of the season that we can have him on cheap this year. You know, whether it's cheap on the U22 or whether it's cheap because he's on his option, whatever, we can dump him. You know what I mean? So like if all you're trying to do is get out of Jesus's cap, then this is a guy that you can dump and be out of cap real fast. Right. Mm-hmm. Maybe he comes good. Maybe he works out for you. Just like they're getting a guy who's down and out, Jesus. Dallas is getting back a guy who's a bit down and out in Chu. So we'll see what happens.
So, Buzz, I think people come and listen to this podcast because they want to hear your opinion and your opinion specifically. Now that you've had a few days to think and ponder on this, if this deal goes down as we understand it, as discussed here, what is your opinion about that?
I think that they're getting less value for Jesus than they should. I think they're selling at rock bottom rather than anything else but rock bottom. Like I said last time we did a podcast, Peter, I said Dallas needs to have the cojones to not sell Jesus under value. Sit on him for half a season. You know, go to your coach. You've got to get this guy producing because we need more value than this. You can't be afraid to go into the season. Like, how many times have they said they would like to be Seattle, where they make the midseason change and get hot at the end, right? Mm-hmm. They say that all the time. Oh, we're going to sit on the transaction and see if we can use it in the summer. It never has worked for them like it works for Seattle. So I would have still liked them to see that because you're selling a guy at rock bottom, you know. But I think it just goes to, again, to cycle back. It goes back to tell you that how their panic moves are never great, and this is a little bit of a panic move on their part. And Jesus is absolutely desperate to go. So. You know, their hands may be tied. I think that you could have gone to Jesus and say, we're going to do our very best for the summer, but you've got to bring it for 5 months to get this value up so we can sell you for more than $200K over the next 3 years. So I'm not thrilled with it.
Okay. That's what I think the people want. Let's move to Paul real quick. We obviously have mentioned that deal has not happened. I do think one of the weird ironies of this is the last time we talked, we were all convinced if anything was going to get announced first, it was the Paul deal, not the Jesus deal.
Yep.
So do you have any insight as to why that hasn't happened yet?
No, I do not, other than with the window coming, people may have been more interested in getting the Jesus thing done. I wouldn't put it past Seattle have to put a deadline on the Jesus deal where they can feel like they can sit on Paul and see what their money looks like as they get closer to the season. For Dallas, we all love Paul Arriola as a person, as a captain, as a solid contributing MLS player. Having Paul Arriola on your team is not a bad deal. It's just the contract. So at this point, because he's approaching 30, anything you can get for Paul is all about a salary dump. And if you get a player back, if you get an international spot back, whatever you can get back, you get back, because he's not a DP like Jesus who can be a game-changing 20-goal player. Paul is approaching the end of his career and is a leader, which has got value, versatility, which has got value. But you at this point, you just do. It's all about getting that number off the contract, because it either keeps a DP spot open or it saves you $1 million in GAM, on top of saving you like a full DP slot in terms of just pure salary. So, Paul, you would actually literally do anything to take off your books, because of that. If you actually want to try and get better, he's even more important than Jesus is, frankly.
Arman, the scenario in which we're talking about Paul in Seattle seems like a pretty sweet deal for Paul, and everybody's alarmed that he may be asked to take like a 50% pay cut, but he will get, if this deal goes through, he'll get all of his money for 2025, because he'll get whatever Seattle doesn't pay him, Dallas will just buy out. But he also gets a longer term deal with Seattle because he'll sign a new contract for more years. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. Again, like all these Seattle deals are pretty funny how they work, because they're just wanting Jesus and Paul at levels that they're not at right now. So again, they want Arriola closer to that TAM line, which is close to that borderline TAM, which is around that $744,000. But he would get all of what he's getting in 2025. Just Dallas would pay that portion, buy out that portion from their budget charge, and then Seattle would pay a smaller portion relative to that.
Yeah, to be clear, if you do the Paul deal, you're basically preventing you from doing a contract buyout on a Paxton or a Leggett or on anybody else.
Yeah.
We hear positive vibes about Paxton. That's not the same as actually seeing him improve it. But I think the club would be happy to have Paxton on his number at some level of contribution. Sebastian Leggett back into last year, honestly, best player on the team over the last 3 months of the season. Okay, we'd like to move that salary, but if we can't, not the end of the world. It's only a couple $100,000 buy down. If you can use your buyout on Paul to make this deal happen, then you do it, because you don't have any other albatross contracts other than his. And that's what that thing is for. That's coming money right out of the Hunt's pocket, and you take care of this contract. Paul gets his money. He gets to go back to the West Coast. It's a win-win for everybody. And if you get a bag of balls back, you get a pick back, you get some supplemental roster, homegrown who's not working out, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Whatever it takes to get it done, you do it.
And Buzz, like you said, I think you're 100% right. It is more important for the cap to have this Paul Arriola deal done than the Jesus Ferreira deal done, because there's, in just the pure numbers, the budget charge for Paul is around 1.7 million. Like, that's significant. And again, for Jesus, we're looking at a number that was closer to that 744,000, because he's the designated player. So I know it opened up a key prime roster spot that allows them to allocate things, but in terms of pure opening up space, Buzz, you're 100% right. That trading Arriola and clearing up that space opens up significantly more.
Arman, and I mean this lovingly, you are you're here because you're an egghead, and I love you for it. When you just look at this from the numbers and the data standpoint, how do you feel like this works for Dallas? Or do you feel that, do you think this works? This is a good resolution for them? Both in terms of the Jesus and the Paul deal?
In terms of the Jesus deal, again, I'm kind of on the side of Buzz. I'm not exactly sold because Leo Chu has been has had some numbers, especially again, you're getting him on a low. And Jesus has had sparks, and we've seen those sparks that Jesus has had in 2023 and 2024. If you look at his expected goal numbers and his expected assists, some of his other metrics as well, they're fine. It's nothing great. It's nothing crazy. They're fine. It may be a little inflated. Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
For Arriola, I think that's again the solution. Like that solution is a bit better for the club because it clears up that space. And Arriola, look, they're wanting to put him at wing back at some moments. They wasn't sure. He's a great leader in the locker room, from what I understand. His numbers have declined drastically since what we've seen.
22.
Since
22. He got dropped from the World Cup.
Exactly, and it's fallen off. And I'm assuming the move to wing back didn't really help when he played wing back in those moments either. And I think for them to get off his contract, give him a fresh start somewhere else. I think the Arriola deal, regardless how it gets done, and even if they get like a first round pick, even if they get like $50K in allocation money or something, whatever it is, I wouldn't expect much to come in Dallas's return, outside of just being a pure like salary like dump for them to clear up that space. I think the Arriola deal is way better in terms of need and other things and how Paul's actually been playing than the Jesus deal.
These two moves are so obvious that the very first thing I wrote back on October 30th was an article that said, sell Jesus for anything more than $3 million and get Paul's contract off the books. Those are the two things you have to do in order to make this team be any better for next season.
Okay.
And that's the number one focus of the offseason has to be those two things.
Arman, the irony is my head is actually egg shaped. So
it isn't that.
It is. Yeah.
It's not that bad. It's not that bad.
The other part of this is it is interesting that all of this is happening because I feel like it wasn't that long ago, Buzz. We were all just kind of sitting around poking a stick into the sand saying, hey, Zanotta, Dallas, Dan Hunt, do something. And they're doing a lot. This has been one of the most active off seasons in this club's history.
Yeah, they've pulled the trigger on multiple deals. They're actually trying to be proactive about getting this team better. They're trying to get it back on track of the FC Dallas way with the academies and the homegrowns and the development. It's not always the homegrown. Sometimes it's the U22 guys. As Mon said, it won't shock me to see them go 2 DPs for U22 initiative players. That's the Dallas way. You know, they're going after center backs. Now, they may not be going after the guys that I might go after, but they're going after guys. You know, they're bringing in pieces. Some of these trades are better than others, but the pieces they're bringing in are even lined up exactly with the kind of coach they have. You know, a coach that fits this club and fits this system better. So, you know, in a general vibe, they're doing what we said they needed to do. So execution, of course, and payoff are going to be the key. How we grade them.
Okay. That's a little over 30 minutes of Jesus Ferreira to Seattle talk. So I think that is well done there. As you said, there's been lots of action. And before I get into the deals that we know that have happened, amazingly out of the blue, the other day came this somewhat, I don't know how much value we want to put into this, but the noise that the Moose has interest from 2 clubs in the Premier League, which could net Dallas a whole bunch of money versus the idea of now suddenly losing Musa for the 25 season.
Yeah, this one's interesting. You know, I can't begin to tell you how real these stories are from across the pond, but teams have been named and Dallas has been named as saying they have an 18 million pounds price as a starting price of discussions. If obviously 2 teams are coming in, that'll raise the price. Theoretically, that's roughly 22 million US, depending on what the exchange rate is at the moment. Like it changes from week to week. But this is how selling leagues work, right? You bring in a player. If you double your money within a year, and that's perfectly understandable to sell this guy at that price, there would be no complaint from me if you can sell him for over $20 million US. Obviously, that changes you from a mid rebuild, which is what I would call what they're doing, to a complete rebuild if you sell that guy, because then you're starting over across the board when you also get rid of Jesus and you also get rid of Paul Arriola. Now you're talking about a lot of things you got to do because, you know, we and I'm sure the club are counting on Petar Musa to be a big, huge part of what they're doing on the front setup of this team next year. And you assumed you were going to be good for goals because you had that guy. So we have no domestic. I don't have any domestic sources that can confirm this. But, you know, this is the kind of winter silly season news These are the kinds of guys that a club in England will go drop 20 million on without blinking. Like, to a lot of these clubs, that's not a big deal. They'll go sign a backup on that kind of money. And the two teams that were listed, by the way, for those curious, were Nottingham Forest and Leicester City. You can, if you know those two clubs, you can know why maybe they were interested in a striker. So Vardy being 30,000 years old and Nottingham Forest looking for goals, even though they're in the top of the league. So we'll see. I'm not super believing in this one, but man, if somebody comes in with 20-something million, 22 million, I won't blame the Hunts for selling.
Yeah, Forrest may be in because they may end up having to sell somebody in their front line, and they may need a backup. Arman, I'm interested in your thought about the idea of how, like, what does that number got to be for Dallas? That's the line in the sand to say, okay, we'll sell him.
I mean, Musa was such an important part of the team's, like, I guess, turnaround in the second part of the year. But one thing that was super interesting about Musa is he actually, like, overperformed his, like, expected goals by, like, 6 goals. Like, it was a ridiculous run. I think I even, like, threw out a tweet about it where, like, his goal, like, conversion rate from his expected numbers were, like, insanely high. They actually were a lot more closer to what his expected goal numbers were more closer to what he was doing at Boa Vista than any of the two Benfica years. And look, I think that number for Dallas, if you can get around that 20, 22 in that range, you recoup how much you bought him for, which was around 12, 13 million, give or take. Then you get that. And then you also can allocate some of that money to be used to continue roster building. But at that point, Peter, you have so much money in allocation money from the Jesus deal, from opening up Paul's space, from potentially this, that I don't know what you could do with it. I mean, Dallas, I'm looking at this right now, could have
a really good center back, maybe.
I guess, but they would have a surplus of $7 million in allocation money if those things go. That's insane for the players that they have. I was looking at this and running through some scenarios for you guys, and I was like, I don't even know what they could use with all this money. You could buy a DP and do all that stuff, and it'd be so much. So for me, I don't think they need to do this deal, but if the offer comes and it makes sense, you kind of have to, no?
Yeah, something you brought up that I want to make sure people understand what that means, and maybe help me reset my understanding of it. When you talk about him outperforming his XG, the implication of that is that there's a chance he may regress backwards next season because he's overperforming.
That's correct. And the thing that's interesting about Musa, though, is a lot of those shots that had the lower expected goals, they're expected goals. So there's two models, right? There's one when you actually kick it, and then, or when before you kick it, and there's one when you actually kick it towards the mouth of the goal. And for Musa, he actually would like, for example, if an expected goal was 0.06, when it was actually kicked on frame, it was closer to like 0.3 or something like that. So he actually improved those shots. But yes, to your point, we know that expected goals are predictive, and we know that they're predictive of future goals. So yes, there is a chance that Musa, again, it's kind of hard to tell because there's a coaching change, a philosophy change, et cetera, et cetera. And if you remember, Dallas wasn't great offensively at the beginning of the year and shifted, the pendulum shifted complete other direction at the end of the year. But there is a chance that Musa could regress and go and not score as many goals as he did compared to what he did in 2024.
Arman, Buzz and I, as old guys, used to call that's a striker who was on a heater that cools off.
Yeah.
That's like the non-stats explanation of what we're talking about.
The other answer is that when people exceed their XG, it's because they're clinical finishers. But the bottom line with any deal like this is, yes, it's a bummer. But remember that the Hunts from the get-go have an all about this team being at least self-sustaining or neutral in revenue loss, if not profitable on its own. And they've never really gotten it in the stands or the TV deals or the marketing or the jersey sales to be that. The only way they've made it happen is by selling players for money. So, if they make a $10 million for 1 year off a player, they are pulling the trigger because they want that peppy golden shower of coin raining from heaven, and so they can swim in the cash for just a bit and feel really good about themselves.
Well, let's not also forget this would be happening right upon the precipice of them losing more than 50% of their ticket revenue and game day revenue. So that seems like that would be a really, really good a deal of good timing if that was to happen.
Carry through a couple of seasons of down revenue, huh?
Yeah, at least. For sure. All right. We also had more Argentina and Allen links again, which all seems pretty weird. Are we tired of this? Do we believe
we're tired of it? This one happened after he redid his deal, and somebody said to me on Twitter, "Why would Dallas sell a guy that just redid their deal?" Well, because the new deal like that makes the price go way up. So if Boca's calling, you redo his deal, and you go, price just doubled, right? So the most recent report, and there's always these all the time. The most recent one says that now Boca wants just like half of his pass. They would get the player and only like half of his pass, and Dallas would get the other half. So you can see why, like, okay, if you come in with a bunch of money and we make our money back, and then we get half of his pass, expecting he's going to be great and go for crazy money because Boca can sell for crazy money, blah, blah, blah. That's what the thinking would be on Dallas's end. I don't think it's any more likely than it was a month ago, or a year ago. I think when a guy ups for he now is the longest contracted player at the club. Obviously, they're doubling down on him. He's going to be the guy going forward. So, yes, there's a price for anything, price for everyone. I think for Allen right now, it would be really high. I think you would have to get into, honestly, Petar Musa territory for 100% of a pass. If you want to go $10 million for half his pass, and we're looking at a complete rebuild, and we're selling Musa too, I mean, at that point, why not? Honestly,
burn it down. Burn it all the way to the ground.
If you're going to get rid of Paul, Jesus, Musa, and Allen, I mean, you might as well do it all at once, right? It's the Logan Farrington show at that point. So,
could you imagine trying to compare your 2024 team photo to your 2025 team photo without those guys in it?
Well, you only got to sell 10,000 tickets each game this year, so or 12,000.
How many drone shows?
12,000. Yeah. Oh, lots.
Well, you know what? Since we last talked, I believe the company that does Dallas's drone shows is the company that had the big accident in Orlando that ended up having their drone show in downtown Dallas canceled for New Year's night. That's
in the schedule release, they said there's going to be more drone shows, so they'll get somebody else.
Hey, 17 drone shows for every home game. Who's against that?
Until they fall and land on some kid's head. Yeah. Oh, wait. They've already had a letter fly off one of the stadium.
Yeah, smash a guy.
Smash a dude. So that's right. By the way, just go back and read the list on Buzz's website. You'll learn all about that. All right. So some things actually have happened. Everything that we've just spent the last almost 45 minutes discussing are all things that have yet to happen or may never happen. So let's quickly run through things that have actually happened. And this one completely blew my pants off. Shaq Moore is coming home. They traded him for Gam, and he will likely be your starting right fullback next season.
Yeah, here's the deal. They didn't just trade him for Gam. They traded him for the same amount of Gam you trade a third-round draft pick for, which is that's lunch money. That's 100% pure salary dump by Nashville. That's what they need to do with Paul effectively. FC Dallas does get $50K Gam back. I mean, that's nothing. That's almost as the least amount you're capable of trading. That's half of a supplemental player. That's nothing.
Arman, how much is he making a year in salary?
So he's above, for this year, he's above the TAM threshold according to MLSPA from last year at 881,000. But Nashville was really up against it. I think their allocation money room was 200,000. They had to make some moves to clear up space. And it seems like Dallas is picking off players like that. And that's how they were able to get Shaq Moore for so cheap, because they needed to clear up that space in order, exactly like Buzz says, like what Dallas needs to do with Paul Arriola, in order to clear up space to make more moves to bring in more players.
The Nashville beat writer, is it Bird, I think is his last name, he tweeted that they're also paying $800K on top of that for his transfer fee buy down. They were. So that's not something that Dallas paid though. And they would, I believe that if I understand all correctly, they're getting him on just his base salary. With some incentive with $100K if he does really well or whatever, but still that's nothing. It's
basically free. I mean, it's basically free, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think the Nashville beat writer's name is Billy Ray. But
no, it's Billy Ray Cyrus. Yeah.
Do you like Shaq as an option and as a player for Dallas?
Yes. The salary's a bit high. Well, the player is fine. Former academy player here. The player is perfectly fine. It's always about the number.
Okay.
So his number as a right back is basically almost a TAM buy down number. So but it's a right back. That's not a paradigm altering position. Those players don't need to be TAM players. They need to be Marco Farfan, 400, 300, right? Who's on the left. So it tells us two very, very important things. One, it confirms that Ruan is not coming back, which we already probably knew, but that's for sure now. It also, again, raises the specter of Giovanni Jesus must be totally jacked and completely screwed, because you would not do this. You would not trade for Shaq Moore if you thought Giovanni Jesus was going to play this year or ever again for your team.
You mean his knee, not him. You mean not like he's physically bulked up with
jacked.
Muscles. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It must be way worse than we thought or we heard it was, because you just got a guy on big money, national team pool player. He's not first choice, of course, but he's in the pool still. So man, that's it's very telling for what it means beyond the fact that it's a solid player, paid more than you probably would like, but yeah, good player.
So Buzz, if I told you that your starting back four is Shaq Moore, Ibeagha, Tafari, and or put in Boubacar in there, and Farfan, how would you feel about that?
That's a pretty solid athletic back four. I mean, I don't hate that idea. That's a much more aggressive, like Shaq Moore is way more aggressive getting forward in a Brian Reynolds, who played for Eric Quill, by the way, or Reggie Cannon style. This is not a stay-at-home guy like Marco Farfan. So if you're wanting to have athletic outside backs, which Quill often does, this guy way more fits that paradigm than some other guys might.
All right. So the other one, I'm going to tell a quick story because I learned a lesson, and I should have learned this lesson the first time I did it, which is you should be careful making fun of players' personal attributes in public, because your club will eventually sign them and make you feel stupid. And I learned this I should have learned this the first time with Brian Dunseth. I don't know, Arman, you're probably too young to remember this, but when Brian Dunseth debuted for the Revolution 100 million years ago, Buzz, do you remember this?
I do.
What did Brian Dunseth wear on the field when he was a rookie player?
Oh, I don't remember that. Was he the headband guy?
No. He was the loop earring guy.
Oh, yes.
Fresh.
He wore hoop earrings, which seemed very dangerous and really weird.
Yeah.
And I made a lot of fun of him back in the day. And then, of course, Dallas signed him many, many years later after he stopped wearing hoop earrings. So you would think I would have learned that lesson when somewhere deep in my Twitter thread, if you looked carefully enough, I'm sure you will find a tweet of me making a lot of fun of Anderson Julio for pulling his socks all the way halfway up his thighs. Because I'll be damned if Dallas hasn't traded for the socks guy.
Well, here's my take. First, let me say that I love Sam Junga. This guy was a phenomenal dude.
Who they traded him for.
They traded for Anderson Julio. Phenomenal dude. Great in the locker room. Versatility. Great price. Great worker. Covered immense ground. Phenomenal player. I love this deal. I think Anderson Julio is phenomenal. This is the kind of power and pace and speed that just wrecks defenses if you can't run. And there's a certain amount of running that has to happen in this game. This is not a league where you can Barcelona ticky-tack everybody to death. Nobody's that good at this level. Power and pace matter at this level. I love this guy. I think this is a phenomenal trade.
Even though he's not a starting type player?
I think he'll be a starter here.
Really?
I think the amount you gave up for him, Sam Junka is a really nice roster player, but only gets paid like $250 or something that he was on. $400K GAM is like, that's 2 international picks, or that's like 2 first round draft picks. Maybe that's not a big deal for me to get a guy that I think is a game breaker like this, that fits the coach. This is the kind of power. This is basically, think back to Eric Cole as a player. This is who that is. Pace, power, and ability, right on the left side, like Eric. So I love this move. I think it's a great move.
Where does he fit in Quill's system?
I think he's your starting left wing. I do.
So your front three is who?
Petar Musa on the at striker, Logan Farrington at right wing, and Anderson Julio at left wing. Alvan Velasco will play the point in a 4-2-3-1. That's what I think.
Okay. Now I'm in a worst case scenario. Jesus is traded. Musa is sold. And just for shits and giggles, Velasco is sold. Who is your starting four now?
Well, Leggett would take over the point, probably. Julio would still be a starter. At that point, maybe Bernie. Depends on what Leo Chu looks like in camp. That's who you'd be looking at. Farrington would be the 9 almost certainly.
Okay.
We talked about that. If you sell Musa, and if you sell, for sure, if you sell Velasco, but if you sell Musa, you're in complete rebuild mode. That's down to the bones and going
wooden
from
spoon.
Scratch. I think you could do better than wooden spoon, but you'd be going with completely new everything. I mean, as it is right now, you're relying on the Musa, Velasco, some Logan Farrington performed really well. Leggett performed pretty well. You think maybe you're getting your Mendy back. Kafimana performed pretty well. You had some solid pieces, right? You had some base stuff happening. You just need to bring it up. You're moving out Jesus, so you're going to have something to elevate. You're going to move out Arriola's contract. You brought in Shaq Moore, trying to elevate the back, right? So these pieces are happening. You try to elevate everything. Now, if you end up having to sell Musa and Velasco, now you're back to the drawing board of needing all new DPs. That's a completely different scenario than it is of moving out one huge cap hit and one DP and maybe changing up what you're doing slightly. That's a mid rebuild what we're looking at right now.
All right. And I can tell Arman is waiting for you to do this. Give letter grades to both those trades, please, Buzz.
The Shaq Moore is a B deal only because of his number. That's a big number for a right back. I think that Anderson Julio trade's an A. I love that trade.
Okay.
And I say that with 100% belief that Sam Junka is a fantastic piece, but I like Anderson Julio a lot. Anderson Julio is the kind of player when I watch him play against FC Dallas, and this is probably what they did too. Like, holy crap, what a baller. Why can't we get that guy? That's the kind of player this is to me. And I'm sure it's what happened when he scored from midfield against Martin Paz.
I'll only be happy with it if there's some line in his contract that they'll only give him medium-sized socks. Arman, what do you think of those trades? You happy with those?
So Shaq Moore, I think is definitely like a floor raising move for sure. Like, I think.
What do you mean by that?
Like, I don't think it's a ceiling raising move, but I think Dallas's floor gets a lot higher with the addition of Shaq Moore.
Well said.
So smart.
I think he's a really good player, and it seems like Dallas has also got like a renegotiated deal with him as well for the later years. So maybe that cap hit goes down in later years, especially with the thresholds moving and all the BS and stuff going on. So
that'd be nice.
I think for me, I like the Shaq Moore deal as a floor raiser. I'd say a B is fair because they gave up nothing for him. I mean, they have so much allocation where they can do whatever, and his metrics are fine. They're nothing crazy, and for the price, like Buzz says, it's nothing amazing and special. But again, they have so much room that they can afford to do this stuff. The only question I have with the Julio move, because again, they didn't give up much. They gave up $200K in GAM across 2 years. Sam Junka was an amazing salary for his production, or amazing production for his salary, excuse me. But with Anderson Julio, the one thing is, in the system, I know he's played a lot of second striker and striker. I think occasionally a winger. I just wonder how, and I'm sure Eric Quill has a plan for it. I wonder what's Eric Quill's plan to implement him as a winger versus when he plays a second striker or a striker. Because I know in RSL, he often played one of those two roles, but his advanced numbers are great. The only thing is, again, if you look at minutes wise, it's not that much volume in minutes. I mean, he played 1,000 minutes in 2021. I think 527 in 2022, 1.1 in 2023, and 1.4 in 2024, which isn't like a consistent day in, day out, like starting numbers. The last time he played over, I think, 2,000 minutes was in 2018 when he was 21 back in Ecuador. So that to me is a little
weird. I mean, Buzz, isn't
that to me is a little concerning, and that's why I would push his move to like a B. I mean, from a pure advanced, if I look at it as blind, advanced metric, green bars, I would be like, overthink. The only thing is, I'm a little concerned with some of those underlying things but either it means that player has a lot more freshness in his legs, or it means something else is up, and I'm not sure what it is.
Well, don't forget that RSL went through this disastrous owner thing and coaching changes like twice. And now Pablo's in there. So different coaches see guys different ways. The thing about both these deals I like is that the player metric, the player profile fits this coach, the new coach we have here. I like both of those things. And worst case scenario on Anderson Julio, RSL picked up his option before back in October. So they were willing to pay him what they considered him worth that value. His contract isn't optional. They have one for 2026 here now in Dallas. Worst case scenario, if it's not working out, you just don't pick up the option and you move on.
Yeah.
Right. And you'll give up Sam Junka for him, which is a great piece. But as Arman said, this is a guy that Houston had just let go, and Dallas signed him for nothing basically when he first got here. So, the value on the Julio deal, to me, the money and the potential upside here are high, whereas Shaq Moore, the money's not so great. and as Arman so smartly put it, raises the floor of the defense in terms of making your team less bad, but maybe doesn't make it great. And maybe the Anderson Julio question also is part of the sell Petar Musa. If all of a sudden I need a 9, maybe that's in the cards that maybe Logan Farrington stays at wing.
Yeah, I like the Shaq Moore deal more than I do the Anderson Julio deal, socks aside, only because just my kind of old man analog observation is I feel like we're getting somebody else's bench player as an idea as a starter, and that to me doesn't feel like a good thing, a good move. But
when you're the 12th place team and you get that bench player from the 3rd place team, maybe he is a starter.
Maybe. All right. Fair enough. And Buzz, are you hearing any noise that, Zanotta promised everybody there's another center back coming? He
did. Nothing specifically other than the bizarre foot mob mishap today where they listed Maya Yoshida.
Not foot mob. That's a different website. Mob.
Mob. I don't know my mobs. I can't keep them straight.
I would call it foot mob too, though. Like, is that like?
It's not the Rex. It's not the Rex Ryan bookmark. No, it's Fot Mob.
Either way, they posted on their transaction page today. They posted Dallas signing Maya Yoshida, who is the LA Galaxy's captain and defender of the year. Granted, he is 36, but he played 34 games in the league last year and 41 games in all comps and all those minutes and was their best defender. Stop me if you've heard this. An LA team wins an MLS Cup with a veteran defender who now is a free agent, and Dallas comes in and signs that old guy to be their center backs one. Stop me if you've heard that story before.
Imagine an FC Dallas backline featuring LA Galaxy and LAFC burned out center backs from their MLS Cup winning season.
I mean, this dude has got a resume, though. It is legit. Now, yes, 36. Ordinarily, I would hate that. Also, we have no idea if this is real. Maybe somebody was making a joke. Maybe somebody leaked something. Who knows? But it's a thing, and it was out there. And Zanotta did say they were going to get one more center back, and it's a story we've heard before of Dallas going and signing an LA center back coming off of MLS Cup win.
Wait, was it Omar 36? Omar Gonzalez.
Oh, Omar's 35. Yeah.
So he's older than Omar Gonzalez?
Yes, but he's also starting every game at center back for the MLS Cup winner, and Omar hasn't started every game in like 5 years.
All right. And Ibiaga hadn't started a bunch of games for LAFC. He was thrust into that role late in the season, wasn't he?
Yeah, for most seasons with LAFC, he was about a half-time starter, and then he started down the stretch and the bulk of the back end of that season, including winning MLS Cup. But, Dallas watched tape. They saw a guy performing at a pretty good level, and they went out and signed somebody else's center back. Okay. So if you need a center back, and you remember they had a deal for a center back this summer, and the guy failed his physical. So they pooched that one. So now it's like, crap, we need another center back. I'm just saying it's not going to shock me if this is real.
All right, but again, everybody comes to this podcast to listen for Buzz's opinion. If you find out that the 2 center back additions in this offseason are Lalas Abubakar and Maya Yoshida, how are you going to feel about that?
Well, I'm not too thrilled, but it is totally FCD-like. This is what they do, right? They go out and they get somebody else's shelf player, this guy, like in a vacuum, this guy at a 1+1 as a depth piece, or maybe he's still got plenty left on the rubber and maybe he's good enough. Maybe he outplays Ibi or Nkosi. I mean, look, at this point, right, what you have in Ibi and you have in Nkosi. You have a Nkosi. In the past, Abubakar was better than he is today. What you have in all those guys. If this other dude comes in and all of a sudden it's center back by committee, or if just the competition alone determines that these guys have to play better than the other dudes to keep their spot, maybe it's not so terrible. I mean, for where you are and from what you had last year, it's not how you win MLS Cup. But if a lot of these dudes are on 1 or 2 year deals, I can live with what happens over the like you're in a rebuild, right? So this is not the center back one we wanted or expected. And for all I know, it's complete garbage that somebody was just playing a joke. So it may not even be real. But
yeah, for sure.
We're still talking about FC Dallas who, I'm not necessarily in favor of a DP center back. I don't like to spend DP money at center back. I think you can get a Reto Ziegler TAM center back, and that's fine. So if this guy at 36 is still got enough on the rubber to be Reto Ziegler for a couple of seasons, I don't hate that. That's not awful.
It would not surprise me if Dallas in 25 ends up with a pair of twins as their 4 center backs, 2 old guys and 2 young guys who are very error prone.
Yeah. You mix and match them. You know, you nobody plays 34 games really. It's going to be competition training. Who's playing the best? You know, maybe even some kid comes along and maybe Carl Sante becomes the guy you want him to become. You never know what's going to happen. You know, it'll be up to coaching at that point. We're in an era now, and this is what's new for us and hard to understand, where it used to be that you had a very clear, definitively defined starting set, and then you had a couple of young kids or guys you were developing. And Dallas is moving past that. They're getting to the stage where they're going to now have full-blown veteran pros too deep at every position. And that's not the end of the world. If they can move out some of this money, maybe we can talk about in the summer or next winter, maybe there's a real CB1 on big time money that comes in, but it's tough.
Is there a nerdy stats thing you want to throw out there about Yoshida that would make somebody feel good or bad about this? If in fact it's even true and not just some sort of weird website error?
I'll be honest with you. I would really like if Yoshida was assigned here. I mean, he played really well and for the Galaxy. I mean, he was their captain. He's a veteran presence on the team. I know he's a bit older. I know he's 36. And the only thing that I might be a little wary about is how can he handle the Texas Heat? Because that's a legitimate issue that we've seen center backs have issues with, for lack of a better word.
Mr. Martinez, I think.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that's one thing that I think that needs to be aware of. But I mean, outside of that, I think Yoshida would be an excellent signing for the team, to be honest. And the Galaxy would struggle to afford to keep him. I'm sure they want to, but they're up against a cap with all the MLS Cup bonuses that are hitting the contracts now. So again, this could be an opportunity that they could capitalize on there. And I personally would like Yoshida. I don't think he would be a bad signing at all, especially it's not ideal, right? They have the money, they have the room to make, I think, a bigger move and get maybe a younger guy and actually put in a transfer fee. But if this is the case, the situation, I don't think it's a bad move by any means. I mean, to be honest, I think it's a good move and it probably puts a captain on the team.
Arman, do you like draft talk?
I mean, it's fun.
Oh, okay. Well, then you'll enjoy this because since we last talked, Dallas did draft 3 new players. This also gives me tired head, but Buzz, I know this is one of your favorite things in the whole world. So why don't you tell us about Enzo, Sam, and Mohamed?
Yeah, I think there's probably an 80% chance that none of these dudes play for FC Dallas next year.
Wow. Any of them?
Wow.
Yeah. Enzo Newman is now listen, they changed the draft a year or 2 ago, Arman, where you can now draft underclassmen.
Yep.
So Enzo Newman is a sophomore. He's basically like 18, 19 years old. This is like drafting Malachi Molina. Does that help you? No. Peter's looking blank. Malachi Molina plays for North Texas SC. He's a right back on a hybrid deal. He may be a homegrown coming up this season. This is like drafting Herbert Indele.
I know that man, Herbie.
Herbert Indele has played 2 games, right? So he's a clone of those guys. Now, you may think he's got a great upside. The chances he's on the FC Dallas roster next year, now they may sign him, but he ain't playing for FC Dallas next year. He's going to be playing for North Texas SC the whole year if they even sign him, if he doesn't stay in school. Because now the way this works is you can leave a guy in school. And remember, Dallas just started a U23 team to play in these summer leagues. So you bring him into your 23 team. You're coaching him up then. Leave him in Oregon State for the fall. I'm just saying, like, the chances of that guy signing with the first team this season are actually not that high. The most likely player to be signed is the second pick, Sam Sarver, who out of Indiana. He was a senior. A lot of people had him as one of the top 5 or 6 strikers in the whole thing. He's more of a winger striker, but he's got Paxton Pomegol energy and vibes and tenacity and nonstopness and like ever Energizer Bunny, no quit. So there's a little something. There's more.
Hopefully not the hip impingement.
Yeah, I just meant vibes, not physicality, not injury. But it's more likely that dude makes the FC Dallas roster than the other guy is. And he's a second-round pick. So more than likely he's starting the year at North Texas SC as well, if he'll take that deal. And the third guy they picked, again, another sophomore, another project player. He's the guy's, his name is Mohamed Sisset. He's Canadian, but he's also, oh, dang it, Arman, who's he play for?
Mali,
yeah. He went to the Olympics for Mali this year. So a guy with a little upside potential, perhaps, but a big-time project. So none of these names are going to mean anything to you if you care about 2025 FC Dallas. These guys are all about long time far ahead, with maybe the exception of Sarver. If you really do jettison all these wingers and forwards and sell all these pieces, then there's room for him. But otherwise, I think even he's in North Texas SC. So the draft's about, like, they sent John Gall to do the draft, which ought to tell you, like, not right? He's the one that headed up all the picks and everything. And like they did quotes from him about the picks because that's what they're going to be playing.
Well, I saved the best because if sometime several days ago you heard some sort of weird sound that sounded like some sort of orgasmic bear, that was Buzz hearing the news of this signing.
Is this the Caleb Swan signing?
Well, that's the one that you made the funny sound about.
Yeah. This is the next homegrown signing. Hybrid deal. They're all going to be hybrid deals going forward. Basically, they stash them at North Texas for a year or two, and then they come up to the first team on a real homegrown deal. I'm just really excited about this guy. This is the best 2007 in the Metroplex for about 10 years now, in my opinion. He reads the game about a second ahead of everybody else at that level. Phenomenally smart player, phenomenally tenacious, hardworking, great touch. Places an 8, but can get forward with some punch. Really great player.
Are you surprised he signed a North Texas deal and didn't try to go ply his trade outside somewhere else?
Well, he had a full ride
Gojo route or whatever.
No, he had a full ride set up in Maryland. His dad is a college football player. His mom was a college soccer player. This is a kid that would have valued the education, would have valued the chance at Maryland. Might have been a quick one and out, possibly, but had accelerated his high school graduation. You remember that when that last time that happened, right? Where he was graduating in December. He was graduating like right now. So he'd have been in Maryland right this minute, playing in their spring ball. So he was moving his career ahead, which is always a good sign of like where the kid is and his ability. So they negotiated a deal and signed him up. And this is not a guy you're going to care about in 2025. He's going to spend the whole season with North Texas SC, but this is the best player in his class. And this is a good signing in my opinion.
All right, an hour and 10 minutes in, and we've covered a lot of ground, but I do feel like we owe this person a little bit of time to address something that we spent a lot of time knocking this dude, and maybe he still deserves to be knocked, but as we talked about earlier, this has been one of the most active off seasons for this club in some time. Buzz, where's your mood or your buzzometer on Andre Zanotta these days?
Well, a lot of it's going to depend on how these guys end up working out. The things that I like about what they're doing are the recognition of the bad salaries that they've got to fix. That's new, that recognition. The fact that they're recognizing and finally admitting that they needed center back help, even if the center backs are not what everybody wanted, at least they've recognized that they needed to do something. I do have a question right this minute about who the second left back on this team is going to be. Maybe it's Nolan, but if it's not Nolan, I don't know who it is. That's an important question that has to be answered. But a lot of the importance of these moves and a lot of my lack of these moves is going to come down to the money. Like you can't bury your team year after year after year with bad contracts. At some point, you have to be better at contracts than this. The Shaq Moore deal looks great. Well, that's a lot of money for right back. And if you still have to carry some of his signing, which I don't think you do, but if you do, that's problematic. What does Anderson Julio's option accelerate to? We don't actually know what his acceleration was. So again, until we see the money and if they end up being a full gut of the team, selling Musa and selling Allen, even like those, if we get to that level, then it's like, we're looking at a full, complete teardown and who the hell knows what we're looking at. But like right now, I applaud the direction of these moves in terms of fit with the coach.
Arman, I'm going to give you the opportunity to opt out of that answer since you're a former employee. I don't want to put you in a position to say.
I'm in.
Okay.
In. Yeah, no.
Blow it out, brother. Say your piece.
No. But look, I think, they diagnosed there's a problem, right? And the problem are, for example, Paul's deal, they've cleared up the deck. They have a boatload of money to work with. The moves that they have right now, they didn't spend that much, and they've been pretty good moves to dip their hands into getting Julio, to getting Shaq Moore, even bringing in Abubakar as like a part of your center back rotation is a pretty good move. The question is, what are they going to do with the rest of this money? Again, we could talk about a surplus of almost $4 million in allocation money. What can they do with this? That's the question that I've been thinking about and staring at. What can they do with the rest of this money? There's so many options that they could go, but what are they going to do with it?
They have to spend it, right? Because if they don't spend it by the end of the season, they lose it.
Essentially, you'd have to spend it or trade for a player that then you could use later. Like, for example, the only way that GAM kind of carries is if you trade for a player and then you get to keep the player, obviously, based on their contract and whatever. So they have to spend it, right? And look, again, they've diagnosed the problem. They've cleared the decks. So now the next step is, okay, how do you go about filling in the rest of this roster? And I think the biggest victory, and I think a move that Andre has to be applauded for, is understanding the Arriola situation and saying, hey, so if they successfully dumps Paulo Arriola's contract, it's a win. It's a big win across multiple fronts for the club.
All right, so Buzz, let's work under the most, I feel like, which is the most reasonable outcome of this based on what we know. Mm-hmm. If 2025 starts with Jesus and Paul gone, but Musa is still here and Velasco is still here, Shaq Moore is here, Anderson Julio is here, you've got at least one new center back. I'm going to keep Yoshida out of this since we have no idea how legitimate that conversation is. That could be a website error for all we know.
Yeah.
Is Dallas in 2025 a better team than it was in 2024 or worse?
Oh, it's not worse. It's better. The stuff they've done on the defense will help the defense be better. It's not going to be elite, but it is improved. As Arman said, it's not going to take a step backwards. Shaq Moore is a good piece, makes you a little bit better across the back. Adding in some center back pieces makes you a little bit better across the back. A lot of it will depend on what whatever this next center back is going to determine a lot about how I feel about your defensive rebuild. The Arman is correct. You'll have an open DP spot and a boatload of money. Now, how you use that may end up being the only thing we care about in the long term. DPs are humongously, massively important. If you hit a home run with that DP, none of this rest of this matters. And the trick is, because you have a overperforming player that's young and on a really low contract, Logan Farrington, he gives you the luxury to not use the DP on the place you vacated. You don't need to use it on Paul. You don't need to use it on Jesus. You don't need to use it at right wing because you have Logan Farrington. So now you can pick another position and you can bring in a absolutely dominant player at a DP level for another spot. If you have Musa, you don't need that. If you have Velasco, you don't need that. Julio, Bernie, something on the left wing, that's fine. Logan on the right with various other combinations. Maybe your homegrowns are coming along. So now you can look at central midfield perhaps. There's a rumor they're trying to dump Sebastian Leget's contract. There's another chunk of TAM salary gap, like big, huge chunk of money. So your Armendi's gone. You put yourself in position maybe to bring in a absolute superstar at the 6'8" sort of position, perhaps.
Is Armendi gone?
Armendi currently is out of contract.
And Austin went and got somebody else.
They got somebody else in that same position. So did Dallas. Dallas got Ramiro in sort of that same position. So, but they have room to bring Armendi back, and still, because his contract at his age probably will be like as it is now, $450, whatever. Not a big deal, right? You could still bring him back. That's fine. But if you vacate Jesus and Ferreira, you now have the chance to bring in a big time stud, prime of career beast of a player somewhere. I look at that 6'8" spot as you bringing in your Carlos Grezzo again, not Carlos Grezzo literally, that kind of player, that kind of impact, stamping the middle of the field would do wonders. Because then if you add a CB1 as a TAM or something like that, you pause, it's great. You're looking pretty damn good. If you bring in, your Simo Valcari, that's probably way under budget at this point. Oscar Pereira type guy, Leonel Alvarez, right? Richard Marooney, somebody of this kind of stature and weight in the center of your park. That is a lot for your team.
Man,
in my opinion.
There's a whole bunch of curious listening to this pod that just heard you say Richard Mulrooney and have no idea who you're talking about.
Well, Richard Mulrooney, I think, won 4 MLS Cups, and he was with FC Dallas, and he hurt his knee, and then that's when Clark got fired, and that when Samora took over and said we trusted the wrong people, and then they turned around and traded Mr. Marooney. I'm like, you're out of your mind, because that Clark's team, when Richard hurt his knee, that team cratered. And he was the reason why, that particular team. But
Richard Mulrooney was a badass,
vastly underrated player, fantastic player. If you could add a player like that in the middle of Dallas' field, now listen, it doesn't have to be in the middle of the field. Wherever you want to use this money, you're going to have a pile of money and an open DP spot to absolutely crush a signing. And if they crush a signing, none of the rest of this crap matters if you crush that signing. Because then you'll have Musa, Velasco, and whoever this is in front of a workman-like defense and a pause. That's a pretty damn good team, right? Up the spine. Spend your money up the spine. Okay. MLS 101.
Arman, anything else you want to share, or insights, observations, opinions, jokes?
Yeah. I mean, well, I already used my drone show jokes. I can't use it again.
Okay.
Heartbreaking. But no, look, and again, to Buzz's point, they actually could do something different, right? They actually, instead of adding a third DP, they could actually say, hey, we're going to keep Musa and Velasco and go 4 U22 players, which are actually a lot harder to hit on, but you actually gain another 2 million in GAM to use on other pieces as well. So that could push their amount of GAM to almost 6 million, which again is a lot. It's an immense amount. But then you could spend it on players that are above, that TAM threshold, buy them down, etc., and bring in bigger contract players that are maybe proven MLS vets, guys that maybe you can pick off rosters like a Shaq Moore, for example, like that range, for example. So there's two ways Dallas could operate here. It's going to be really interesting to see which way they operate. And remember, U22 spots are pretty valuable as well, too, because again, you can spend whatever. Their salary just has to be below the TAM number, and they only hit at the salary cap at 200K, which is nothing. It's such a small, minuscule number. So there's two ways that FC Dallas can operate. Obviously, you'd prefer, I think, the 3+3 for the more instant impact, but there is moments where you could go U22. Like Diego Gomez, when he was first signed from Paraguay to Miami, was a U22 player before he moved on and graduated out of the program. Joveljic, for example, for the LA Galaxy, just graduated from the U22 at the age of 26. Remember, you can be a U22 until 26 years old. And he was a key part of their it's so stupid, but he was a key part of their championship winning team, and that's what made it work.
I'm totally with you. I hear you. But here's the thing. Name a U22 initiative player Dallas has hit on.
Oh, I agree with you. I'm just saying it's an option.
Yeah, their track record of hitting on U22s is 0.
Giovanni,
but
Enes Solly won a North Texas soccer. Yeah. He won a MLS Next Pro Championship.
You just wait till you see him next season with Dallas and tell me again about that. Yeah.
Arman, are you telling me that Dallas has enough of these Garber bucks to potentially trade for Lionel Messi? Is that how much Garber bucks they have?
I mean, you need a lot more than Garber bucks. You may have to sell off the other half of the stadium that they're renovating.
You know what you would have the Garber bucks to trade for this really great Seattle Sounders winger, Jesus something. He'd be about 3 million GAM, and he was on a contract. It's not a DP contract. It's a TAM contract. You bring him right in.
I do what part of me spends a few moments of my day over the last few days putting myself in Jesus's shoes, thinking, man, I'm glad to get out of here, but now I got to go play on the turf in Seattle. And for a guy that's had some muscle injuries and a long-running, some abdominal wall stuff, that seems like a weird mix to me.
Yeah, it does. That's how desperately he wants to go.
Yeah, he wants out.
Yes, and I'm sure Dallas is eager to get him out of the locker room. I'm sure.
I bet you're going to see a slow action on that deal because of the desire to wait a bit on the window here. Give it a week or two, slow play it, slow roll it, see if someone comes calling. Because, anything approaching 3 or slightly over 3 is a better deal for Dallas. Honestly, anything over 2, given that's what you're getting from Seattle, is 2 plus some stuff.
Jesus and his people need to be careful because Seattle isn't going to wait forever. They may find a better opportunity. And
there's probably a deadline.
If he farts around too long, he may end up without any options.
Yep.
And he's stuck here, and Dallas is stuck with him. So
one more thing about Paul, worst case scenario, you can just use your 1 season buyout on Paul as is. It's better to trade him for something and then use the buyout, and get a pile of balls back. But you can't just do it yourself and just buy him out yourself.
Right.
And then you can even maybe re-sign him yourself if you want to stay here or just let him go wherever and don't care. It's worth it to get out from underneath the contract.
Well, that was a lot, boys and girls. Arman, it was a treat to have you. It was great to see you again. I love the mustache, by the way.
Thank you.
And for those, since this is an audio-only podcast, Arman is wearing a very sweet, what appears to be original Dallas Tornadoes jersey with the most 70s fly collar you've ever seen. He looks like he's getting ready to go to the disco. That's ridiculous.
I love a disco. I can't lie. I love a good little disco.
Thanks for coming on the pod, Arman. It was great to talk to you again.
It was great talking to you guys again. This was fun. We definitely got to do it again.
Yeah, for sure. You got anything you want to pimp?
My Blue Sky and Twitter. Is that a thing? Do we pimp Blue Skies now?
Sure.
Yeah. So just at Arman Kafai, which is my name, and you just look it up and you'll see it somewhere. A podcast I wrote, John Arnold and Daniel Robertson, called The Hex.
Yeah.
And some backheeled stuff I do. That's really it, really. I mean, it's all I have to pimp. It's not much.
Yeah.
And this mustache, I guess.
Yeah. Is that Joe Clowery really mean?
Oh, Joe Lowry's amazing. He's also like super young.
Oh.
He's like 24, 25.
Wow, I had no idea.
He started writing like when he was super young. Yeah. So
okay. He doesn't seem mean at all. I just was making a joke.
He's a good guy.
All right. Happy New Year, Arman.
Happy New Year to both you guys.
Buzz, it's good talking to you again. I hope you had a good holiday season, sir.
Thanks, man. I appreciate y'all being here for season 28 of Third Degree and season 7 of this podcast. Can you believe that?
Did you get a kick-ass Christmas gift from Amy?
I did. Yeah.
Would you like to share it with the curious?
No.
Whoa.
Whoa. I posted pictures of it all over social media. It was a trip to Italy to watch some soccer.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us a gross story. I'm glad you didn't post those pictures.
No, just the pictures of us in Italy.
That's right.
On our 11 years later honeymoon.
And you went to the gelato shop I suggested to you.
You did. Yeah.
It was awesome, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was good.
Well, it was great to talk to you, man. Happy New Year to you, too.
Thanks, sir. Thank you.
By the time somebody listens to this, some of this may have happened. None of it may have happened. I have no idea. But thank you, Curious, for listening. Happy New Year to you. We hope you had a good holiday season. And we'll see where this all falls out. And we will speak to you next week. Correct, Buzz?
Oh, yeah. For sure.
All right. On the next edition of Third Degree, the podcast.
Dan, come back.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.